Good morning, good morning. Let's do some overnight. We got that gap up that I was expecting. We got that gap up to, the whole like $3 or so. On the NQ, we're just near that fib, that NQ fib. On the Qs, we actually have not quite reached it yet. So let's flip between those two. Yep. At the fib for NQ. Haven't reached it yet for QQQ. Definitely potential to do that, right? This could be a gap up push day. Identified two very different days in this scenario of an upward consolidation gap up. I'm happy with the identification that this, once it broke out, would go pretty heavy. That was correct. And now we are at the point where we could get either one of these two types of days, or maybe just something similar, but not exactly one of them. The Qs are not at all-time high, though SPY has gapped up into that all-time high. Very, again, really, really possible to get whatever here. There are plenty of examples of a gap up into the highs. This one, for example, this one was a gap up just under. Then we have this one was a gap up just under, gap up into actual highs, sell, gap up, hesitation, right? Gap up, sell off, not a gap up into the highs, not a gap up into the highs, gap up, not a gap up, buy. Here's an example of an actual gap up into highs that ran, and some more pushing that weren't exactly gap ups. Here is an example of a large gap up into a continued run. Gap up sell off. Slight gap up, new highs, sell off. If we're looking for actual high gap ups, gap up into the highs, sold off indecision. All right. Here is another example. This one is kind of similar to today. A gap up into the highs and then a rip. Gap up into the highs, sell off. Gap up, indecision. Okay. Not really gap up, kind of just steady. Slight gap up, not into the highs. Gap up, indecision. Not a gap up, not a gap up. So gap up into the highs on SPY. Very often followed by indecision. Qs, already analyzed that. Kind of mixed. Not really a conclusion. So both clearly mixed. Just a gap up into highs doesn't really indicate exactly something here. So remembering that, right? Super important. I seem to have lost my gap lines. Now we did gap up above these gaps here. We did not gap up all the way. We're probably not going to gap up all the way above all the gaps. More like just end up in the middle, I bet, of these gaps. So there's that. If I look at NQ, oh, what is that? That's strange. There we go. Look at here, a steady grind up with the 10 EMAs, the 2 EMAs all night. Finally getting a bit of a pullback here. So that's kind of expected, but I mean you could say that's expected this whole way up. Got the we got the 15 cross back here. I mean the 2, the 1 hour is still up. Yeah, the 5 cross down all the way back here. So I guess I'm wondering how far this pulls through, but of course, no way to fully know. Yeah, I mean, all-time environment is generally pretty tough, so you got to keep that in mind as well. We have data coming out in 20 minutes. I mean, the fact that we're in this gap here, the fact that we're in the gap tells me it could come all the way down to the bottom side of the gap for some sort of perhaps lower day. The first gap tag doesn't fill, but I'm not exactly sure if that applies to how that applies when we gap up into the gap. So we're going to see there. Flip over to NQ. Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that we're sitting at this fib, let's fib out other days. Oh. Yeah, and generally on the NQ, these 261s seem like they might be pretty great targets for final resistance. I mean, this one fell through it. And then let's fib out this one. Yeah, that one right around the 261 went through it just a tiny bit. That one right around the 261 went through it just a bit. Go ahead and fib out some days here. You see the 261 went through it just a tiny bit, right? Of these strong candles. Fib out strong hammer. Went through pretty good here actually. Fib out this candle. Got the 261 resistance. Into the 423. Some other examples. Fib out the strong candle. 261 resistance. It started just below it. Powered on through. So let's see on this one. Decently strong candle. Right, 261. Then consolidation around it. Couldn't get above. Back to the 161. Pop the 261 a little bit. So definitely these NQ fibs going to be pretty reliable, indicating that this might be a top here. But a parabolic move, you cannot be calling the top. Let's hit ES. I don't think I locked this. Okay, let's lock it. ES also at its 261. Just take a look at some candles here again and see how it usually responds. Yeah, so also some resistance at the 261 here. It's probably going to be pretty similar to NQ, I'm sure. That 261. Fib out this strong candle. Yep. 261 resistance consolidation, then 423. Let's actually scroll back and pick some. We can do it offhand. Okay, yep, 161, right? Pull back, probably 100 or pocket, all the way back to the 0. Another potentially strong candle here. Fib that out. Okay, getting decent above. Need to hold the pocket. Boom, 161. At the end of the day, a little bit of a pullback. Let's fib out. This is a secondary continuation candle. The 261's a line. Okay, there is that 261 off the continuation, and then that 261 consolidation. So ES respecting the fibs as well. So let's scroll over. Think about these. Let's fib out the. It's, things a little thick there. Let's put on my smaller fib. Thinner on the bars. Sync that globally. Lock. Okay, so yeah, now we're at the 423, and actually, I mean, going way above the 423, the ES is now actually getting a bit above this 261. So it's hard to exactly tell. I mean, perhaps then, yeah, I mean, if we come back down to this 423, oh, we can't exactly do that for NQ, can we? I mean, we could turn around and reverse this whole thing into a bearish hammer. Possible. So yeah, there are these. So this is kind of saying that I think this area, now that we've actually pushed up all night, kind of expecting some resistance here, but realistically, since we are at all-time high, and yeah, since we are at all-time high here, it could definitely be funky. You know, mess with the traders a little bit. Yeah, so I mean, here's an example, but that's a huge gap up on the futes. So gap ups on the futes usually carry through. 423. 261. So I'm really kind of thinking this just might be some resistance at the 261. I mean, we could pop over it by like 70 points, 50 points, even 100 points towards like this area. But then ultimately that might be like a high. Get some pullback and then close perhaps on the green. We have to see. Go back to the Qs and the SPY. Yeah, and then this hasn't hit its 261. Yeah, pushed up over the 261. I think on these from previous analysis, I've realized that the range is much bigger on these fibs, so there's that. But on here, we're actually starting, under the 261, obviously, right here. So this could kind of then turn around and support the further movement up. Let's fib out this guy and then fib the corresponding SPY day, flip back and forth, see what we see. Yeah, so the 261, you see the 423s, I've noticed this before, the 423s often turn into 261s on the futes. Yeah, this is the same day, that's the same day. 261 here, 261 all the way up here. Those aren't exactly aligned. But overall, I mean, in a gist, this is getting a little long-winded, kind of just like a daily fib thing. In a gist, I mean, we've got a huge gap up, which is bullish, but it's an all-time high, which then can screw with traders a little bit. We've gapped up over the top down. Typical strategy tells me that could come back down and use that as support. And then on SPY, flip that to the extended. Obviously, same thing. I don't know why it's not showing. There we go. It gapped up over the top down and all that. So, yeah, definitely a day to be careful. I mean, that's kind of what that is the gist that I really want to wrap into this this analysis here. Is that it is definitely a day to be careful. I mean, relatively, you don't want to deny a parabola, call the top. So we're going to see how it turns out. But I think the most important thing to remember is that this is a gap up into the highs. And you have to be careful. I would say scalp a bit bullish generally, and just follow the system. I mean, we've got things now kind of breaking down under the 15 cycle, except they haven't really been going down. I mean, it's actually making a new higher low. So that right there is also kind of in line with this 15 minute MACD. which is resetting down while price grinds up. So if the two and the 5 can flip up and get back into bullish pressure, and flip up the 15, we could grind out for that push above the 261 on NQ, and ultimately the Qs still have room to run, especially if we actually hold this gap up above the gaps here. So could really be a ripper day, you know. I mean, SPY, I still don't like that SPY is gapped up into all-time highs, but in this quite forceful gap. But even then, there's at least room to push. I mean, this right here would be, I mean, this is actually a pretty good example. This is actually a great example, because we had that upward consolidation and a strong gap up into the highs. You know, push, upward consolidation, final pop, and then a gap up, and then it still ran $2.50 or $2, which is 20 points on ES, 120 on NQ. So let's keep an eye on where price is relative to these gaps on this daily. Keep that in mind. If we gap up over it, I like them for support. If we actually close on the gap up, we've got data coming out in 5 minutes, so we're going to have to see what that data brings and then work off of that. So I'll call it for the day. All-time environment's difficult, using the daily gaps, using the fibs. The Qs still have some room to run, but the buttes are at their corresponding 261s, which generally is resistance. So expecting some bullish, pop over it a bit, come up maybe another 60, 100 points or something like that on NQ, and then just start looking to probably play both ways and such, but being very careful because all-time high environment is no fun. So yeah, that's I'll go ahead and leave it at that on the day, and we'll see what data brings in a few minutes.